Good morning. This is another random video, and what I wanted to share today, or what I wanted to express today, is when you have different parenting ideas as parents, how you're going to handle your children. Maybe you may have one idea and your wife or your husband has a different idea of parenting, and this happens quite often. Sometimes we don't realize that that's what the underlying problem is. When people get married, most of the time the things that are in their minds at the time that they're getting together are very different from the things that will hit them as soon as they got married. No one ever thinks about our parenting skills. I think that what might come to mind would be, what do we want for our kids, not how do we achieve it. For instance, you might think that, or you might decide that you're going to send your children to private school. Maybe that's an agreement, or maybe an assumed agreement. Perhaps you two went to private education or receive private education, and you assume that that would be the same for you two, and one person may not realize that the other person may not want to do that for their own children, and sometimes that becomes a problem. Just like parenting skills can become a problem. So if one parent believes in gentle parenting and the other parent believes in traditional parenting, that can be a huge conflict sometimes. Let me share my own experience. My husband was born and bred in Nigeria, so his own idea of parenting is very traditional, very straightforward. Our parents were all teachers, and if you know anything about teachers, you will understand that teachers are very strict and you don't muck around when your parents are teachers, and that's how we both grew up. However, he stayed in that environment. I left when I was very young, and so I was exposed to different ways of looking at things. I also experienced part of the traditional upbringing, part of it that will actually go wrong, that actually went wrong. Let me put it that way. And so when we got married, there were situations that he would want to put his foot down, and I would have to have a discussion. I would have to, how shall I put it? I would have to kind of find a way to get him to rethink the whole process. If the children want to hang out with their friends, we did not grow up hanging out. I certainly did not grow up hanging out. And my husband, I believe, also didn't grow up necessarily mixing up with everyone. And so the assumption is that we will both do the same, which was fine. We don't like our kids hanging out with friends a lot. Personally, I don't mind them hanging out, but I need to know who their friends are. That's where I feel that you have to come to a compromise as to what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. They can hang out, but for me, I need to know who your friends are. I need to know that your friend is someone who's focused. I need to know that your friend is not someone who would get into trouble. I need to know all that before I'll feel comfortable with you hanging out with friends. Whereas, on the other hand, my husband would say, well, no hanging out at all. And sometimes that causes problems, especially if you live away from home or you live in a society where people do hang out as part of their culture. So it's a question of finding a middle ground between your style and his style, or your style and her style. And so what I would suggest would be for younger people who are getting married, or if you have not had any children, or maybe you're having the issues, is to consider your styles of parenting. Talk about it before you get married. I'm not saying that that's the reason for you not to get married. Of course not. These are actually very minute problems in the grand scheme of things. These are problems that can be resolved. It's just a question of knowing that there are problems and that they need to be resolved before you get into marriage or before they face you. And consider how you're going to resolve them. So that would be a conversation. You need to find out what you think about gentle parenting, what you think about traditional parenting. I'm in the middle. I believe that in certain situations you have to apply one style, and in other situations you have to apply another style. Another example is, I believe that if a child gets something wrong, I believe that you need to talk to them, have a conversation with them, and make sure that they're understanding what they've done. Very often, I remember when I was growing up, we were very young. If you did something right, no one asked you, no one had a conversation with you, you were punished for it. And sometimes you focused on the punishment and you really did not think about what you did, whether it was even wrong or right. You just were punished for whatever it was. I think that, yes, you can punish them, but I think it's necessary for them to understand why. I feel that that punishment or whatever the penalty is going to be more constructive if the child understands the reason why they're being penalized. If your child, for instance, fails a test or they're underperforming in something or other, whatever they do, and you think maybe it's because they're spending a lot of time on social media or they're spending a lot of time on their phones, playing games, watching late night TV. If you want to stop them from watching the TV or you want to take their tablet or whatever the device is from them, I think it's important for them to understand that, listen, you fell short. And so as a result, I'm going to take your tablet away from you because I can't trust you to be able to watch those films or play those games as well as do well at school before you then apply the penalty. That way they understand why you're doing it and they will be remorseful. They will think about what they've done and they might just come up with a solution for the problem without you necessarily intervening. If they really like whatever they were doing, whether it's a device or they played games or they watched films, if it's something that they enjoy, they want to continue to do, then trust me, if they understand that you believe that whatever they're doing is affecting something that's much more important, then I believe truly that they will find ways to resolve those issues. So what I'm saying in a nutshell is have these discussions with each other before you have children. Make sure that these issues are resolved so that your path will be smoother than most people who have traveled it. Until my next video, you take care. This is IJ, Sharing Lives with IJ. Goodbye.